If you have a Bible, go ahead and take that, open it up to John chapter 1. One more week. We'll be here through the week before Christmas in John 1. And we're in a few week little Christmas series about regaining the awe of Christmas. We said awe is that feeling that you get when you encounter or experience something that is beyond your grasp, something you can't quite comprehend or understand or grasp. And we talked about, and Christmas is meant to be a season of awe, but we talked about the fact that sometimes that nostalgia and the familiarity of Christmas can take away some of the awe of Christmas if we're not careful with it. So that all of a sudden, Christmas is just about holding on to the past in the hopes of slowing down the present. And so it becomes just about the songs you sing, the old movies that you watch, the traditions that you take part in, that you grew up taking part in when you were a kid. And it even applies even to the religious aspects of those traditions, the carols that we sing, the nativity scenes that we put up, the Bible stories that we tell. It can all become just one more piece of the nostalgia that we hold on to. And when that happens for us, it's like it drains all of the awe out of Christmas. And so that's a big reason why I wanted to go to John chapter 1, because John chapter 1 doesn't have quite the same familiarity as the other Gospels do in regards to Christmas. It's got some familiarity for us, just not in the context of Christmas the same. And so maybe if familiarity doesn't necessarily breed contempt in regards to this, but maybe the familiarity lessens the awe and the wonder of the moment. Maybe turning to something that's a little less familiar will help us to recover some of the sense of the awe of what actually happened at Christmas. And getting back that awe that maybe slipped away or drains out. Getting back that awe, we said, started with this transcendent Jesus. That's what we looked at last week. And transcendent, the simple definition of transcendent is to climb beyond. And so John paints this picture of a Jesus who is beyond space and beyond matter and beyond time. And in a lot of ways, he's beyond our ability to comprehend him. In other words, he's above us. That was the title of the message last week. It was Christ above us. So he's this above us in many ways. He's beyond us in many ways. We said that he's an eternal Jesus. We said that he's a personal Jesus, a relational Jesus. We said that he is a divine Jesus. And he's a Jesus who created everything. He brought the entire universe and everything in it into existence. We get all of that from John 1 through 5. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, that's relational, and the Word was God, that's the divinity of Jesus. He was with God in the beginning. When everything was created, he was already there. He's eternal. And through him, all things were made. He's the creator of everything that you see. That is the transcendent Jesus. And when you face or approach or experience in the Word the transcendent Jesus, it can't help but lead you to a sense of wonder at it, which leads to worship. That's the proper response. When you're in the presence of the transcendent God, the proper response to that is wonder and worship. And as amazing as all that is, everything that we looked at last week, as amazing as that is, it's also exactly what you would expect God to be like if you think about it. Apart from the Trinity, which we did talk about last week, apart from the Trinity, it's not at all unusual to believe in a God that's a transcendent God. In fact, pretty much every single major religion that's out there believes in a God that is transcendent. Even the Greeks and the Romans of the time when this was written, they had gods that were so far above us, and those gods were so far above us that they pretty much looked at humans the way that we look at ants. In other words, it's all right to step on them. Nobody gets upset if you step on an ant. I went by our house after the hurricane a bit back, and just wanted to check on the house. We were staying at somewhere else and wanted to go check on the house. And when I went in one day to check on the house, there was this colony of ants that had started building their home in the middle of my den. It was the weirdest thing. Now, we don't have a dirty house, okay? It wasn't like a dirt mound that they were building. It was a mound of ants. Like they just piled on top of each other, made this big mountain there in the middle of our den with the queen up underneath there. They were protecting and all the eggs and everything else right in the middle of the den. It was the weirdest thing I have ever seen in my life. And you know what I did? I didn't be like, okay, guys, let's get out of here. No, I didn't hesitate to go get the vacuum cleaner and suck every single one of them suckers up. And you know what I didn't do after? I didn't shed one tear. I didn't cry about it. No, they're ants. And that's the gods of most religions. Most religions. And so those are gods that you can fear, you can respect, you can be in awe of, but not really gods that you can love. Right? They're just too unapproachable. Do you know some unapproachable people in your life? There's some unapproachable people. Maybe it's somebody that's just so smart. You ever talk to someone that they're so smart that they make you feel dumb every time you talk to them? And so I don't talk to them. They're too smart for me. Maybe they're too important and you feel like you're not quite worth taking up their time. Maybe they're too busy and you just feel like, man, I'm just getting in the way. They're unapproachable to me. Maybe they're too beautiful. You ever been around somebody that you're just so stunned by their beauty or whatever that you're just like, they are above me. I don't even want to approach this person. There's a lot of things, a lot of reasons why someone may seem unapproachable to you. So you can only know those people if they're unapproachable. You can only know them from a distance. You can't really get to know them up close and personal. And if all you had to go on about Jesus was John chapter 1, verses 1 through 5, you would think that he was unapproachable just like the gods of all those other religions, that he's just too far above us to even be able to approach him. But today, we're going to see the other side of Jesus. We're going to see another side of Jesus. Today, we get not just the transcendent Jesus, even though the truths that we're studying are still transcendent, but we're going to get not just a transcendent Jesus, but a present Jesus. We're going to get an approachable Jesus. We're going to get a Jesus who's not just above us, but he's also among us. And I'll put it this way. We have a God in Jesus who condescends. And when I say condescends, most of us have a negative connotation of what that means. I don't mean condescend in the sense of being arrogant or patronizing, like he's the gods of Mount Olympus looking down on us miserable little ants down here. I don't mean it like that. I mean condescending in the sense that he comes down to our level. He stoops down to our level. That's John 1:14. And so as absolutely stunning as those first 5 verses are there in John, I don't know that there's any more stunning statement in all of the Bible than what you see in verse 14. And so if you have your Bible there, let's go ahead and read John 1:14. There the Bible says, and the Word, the eternal Word, the relational Word, the divine Word, the creator of the universe, that Word, John says, became flesh and dwelt among us. That's the title of the message this morning. It's Christ, not above us, but among us. And we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. So I want to break that verse down for us this morning. I'm going to put it in terms of condescension. We're going to look at condescension. In other words, how did Jesus get down on our level? What does this teach us about the way that Jesus got down on our level? And we'll see 3 ways that Jesus gets down on our level in this text. We're going to see it in, first of all, what he took on. We'll see it, secondly, in what he left. And we'll see it, third, in what he hid. So what he took on, what he left, and what he hid. So number 1, what did Jesus take on? How did Jesus condescend? By what he took on. The first phrase there in verse 14, and the Word became flesh. Now, if you were here last week, you might remember that we said that there's this contrast in John chapter 1 between what always was and all of the things that came into being or became. We said that there was one God who always existed, and then there's everything else that came into being. And we said Jesus, the Word here, he didn't become, he always was. There's never a time that Jesus did not exist. And there's never going to be a time that he doesn't exist. He always was. But right here, it does say that he became something, doesn't it? What does it say that Jesus became here in verse 14? Well, it says the Word became flesh. This is the doctrine of the incarnation of Jesus. And incarnate is, you can hear the word carnate in there, which is one of my favorite words because I love to eat meat with every meal. But incarnate just means to be in the flesh. And so this is God in the flesh. And what he's telling us is not just that Jesus took on some sort of skin suit type thing, but that he actually became a man. This is God becoming a man. And so what's new here in John 1:14 is not Jesus, right? I don't think I need to say it again. He always was. What's new here isn't Jesus. What's new here is how the divine being of Jesus took on this human body, and not just a human body, but a human nature. That the divine came together and united with a human body and a human nature. In other words, he became like us. Theologians, if you're a nerdy type, you might like big words. I'm going to give you a big word this morning. This is one of the big ones here. Theologians call this the hypostatic union. And again, I know it sounds like a big word, but all it just means two natures coming together in one person. Two natures uniting together in one person. And there's a lot of ways that you can think about this that are the wrong way to think about the nature of Jesus here, that have led to a lot of different heresies over the course of the past 2,000 years. And I'm just going to give you a few of them real simple. These are wrong ways to think about the nature of Jesus here. The first one is that he was all God but not man. All God but not man. This would be a Jesus who was completely divine, but the body was just sort of like a shell. It was sort of like a skin suit just to hide the divine nature within him. So he's all God, but he's not man. That's not right. The second wrong view is Jesus was all man, but not God. He was just a good teacher. He was a prophet. He was anointed. He was a specially gifted person, really in touch with God, but he wasn't God himself. He was all man, but not God. The third view is he was part God and part man. Maybe like 50-50. He's 50% God, 50% man. So not fully there on either case, but just partly there. Part God, part man. The fourth view is he started as a man, but became God. All right? So he was born just a regular old little boy, grew up to be a regular old man, but at some point in his ministry, and it's usually when he was baptized is where you'll see it, when the Father or the Spirit descended like a dove on him, and God spoke and said, "This is my Son, with you I'm well, today I've begotten you," or "with you I'm well pleased," whatever it is he says. That's the moment that he became divine. So he started man, became God. The fifth view is that his divine nature plus his human nature equals some kind of hybrid creation, right? Just like this completely new being. It's like how if you mix a tiger with a lion, you don't get a tiger or a lion, do you? What happens when you mix a tiger and a lion together? What do you get? Somebody better know this. A liger. That's a real thing. You should look it up. They're crazy creatures. But it's not a tiger. And it's not a lion, it's just a new creature. It's a hybrid being, okay? All of these are wrong. None of these are the way that the scriptures teach us about the nature of Jesus. The hypostatic union tells us that Jesus was all God and all man. He's not 50-50, he's not 60-40, he's not some hybrid, he's not a liger. You know, he's not that. He's 100% God and 100% man, all wrapped up in one person. And so what that means is that Jesus, listen to this is incredible. We talked about it after the service. I was talking for a long time with somebody about this after the service. This is an incredible doctrine, okay? This is still a transcendent kind of a doctrine. But what it says is everything God is, Jesus is, and at the exact same time, everything man is, Jesus is, with one exception. What is the one exception? Sin. So Jesus was everything that God is, and he's everything that man is, minus sin. And so we can see in Jesus everything that it means to be truly God, and at the same time, everything that it means to be truly human. And what's so helpful about this doctrine is that we would not be able to know what either of those two mean if not for this. We would not be able to understand either what it means to be God or what it means to be man if not for this union of both of those natures in the person of Jesus Christ. So if Jesus did not become fully man, we would not understand God. But by becoming a man, he shows us God in a way that we could never have otherwise seen. That's what I mean by condescension. God has always condescended to our level. He's always spoken to us in ways that we can understand. You see it in Jesus. I even hesitate as I'm preaching this because it sounds too much like some sort of systematic theology class or whatever. When Jesus taught, he just taught in stories. He taught in parables. He taught in illustrations, simple truths to help you understand deep things. That's Jesus condescending to our level so that even the unlearned could understand from Jesus. They could be taught from Jesus. That's part of that condescension. But God did that in other ways all throughout the scriptures. You see these references to God the Father having a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. I love that image. But does he really have a mighty hand and an outstretched arm? I mean, literally. Does God the Father have a hand or an arm? No. God is spirit. He doesn't have a body. God the Father is spirit. He doesn't have a body. And so what is that? That's just language that we can understand to help us understand some kind of truth about God that maybe would be hard to understand otherwise. We can see from that image, that metaphor of hands and arms, that Jesus is a strong God that is capable of providing safety and protection, that sovereignly carries out whatever it is that he chooses to do. He has the power to do that with his metaphorical mighty hand and outstretched arm. But that's condescending language. It's language that we can understand, and that's Jesus. That's who Jesus is. It'd be like if you wanted to explain, I know I use dogs in illustrations frequently, but it's the only pet I have. It'd be like if you wanted to help a dog understand deep truths, and you tried to explain deeply, I mentioned this last week, what it means to be a person, and what we go through. They're not going to understand, are they? And dogs are smart animals. They can understand a lot. A dog can sense when they're around you. They can sense whether you're scared. They can sense whether you're excited, and then they get excited. They can sense when you're sad. They can sense when you're disappointed. They can sense when you're mad at them. They really know that. When they do something they're not supposed to do, they understand that you're mad or disappointed in them for doing it. They can sense those things, and they can understand some words. I'd be curious. I asked the early service this, how many words do you think the average dog is capable of understanding? All right, so Millie said 5. Ben is counting on his hand. Anybody without Googling want to take a guess? Did somebody say 100? You're getting there, Joe. All right, sometimes. All right, so the average dog, apparently, I don't know if this is true. How would I know? But apparently, the average dog can understand about 165 different words. That's way more than I would have said. Millie, I was closer to you. I think I would have said like 15 or 20 maybe, but that blew my mind. But when you think about it, listen, this is how deep your dog can understand you. It can understand you about the level your toddler can understand you, and maybe even less. Right? That's about the number of words a toddler has. So they can understand some words, and they can sense, let's just say, they sense you're sad, all right? They get that. There's some instinctual understanding, and it's very sweet. They'll come up and they'll get beside you, and they want to lick you, and they just look at you just all sweet and all that kind of stuff, and you feel like they're really giving you some comfort, like they understand me. But what happens if I try to explain why I'm sad to my dog? Like, Sammy, come here. He gets me. It's been a bad week, Sammy. It's like nothing is going right. Okay? Everything I tried to do, it's backfired on me. It's just, sometimes life's just not fair. And he's looking at you. And you know what he's doing? All he's doing is he's waiting for that one word he wants to hear. He's waiting for treat, right? You don't care about all the emotions you're expressing and all the sadness you're trying to tell him about and all that kind of stuff. All he's doing, he's looking up at you with those sweet puppy dog eyes, and he's just waiting to hear treat. And then that tail gets to wagging, he jumps up, he wants this treat. Right? That's the understanding. So how do I convey deep things to a dog? How do I convey, hey, what it's really like? The only way to do that would be to become a dog, right? If I could become a dog, I could convey to him in a way that he understands and in language that he understands. And that's Jesus. So Jesus is the language that we can understand about God. A God that is very difficult to grasp and comprehend. Jesus is language that helps us understand it. He shows us who God is and what God is like. And so again, Jesus perfectly shows us as people. He condescends to show us who God is like through his humanity. Crazy. But he also shows us in that what it means to be a human. And you say, I already know what it means to be a human. I am one. I get that. Why do I need somebody to show? Okay, let me just change the way I said that. It's not just that he shows you what it means to be a human. He shows you what it meant to be a human in the way that God intended you to be. That's the difference. Because you and I fall short as humans of our full potential that God created us with because of sin, right? Jesus had nothing like that. And so Jesus is, understand this, really a man. When I say he was a human being, when I say he's 100% God, again, I don't mean just this was a vessel that he filled with just the divine, but it was just, the skin suit thing. No, he really was a human being. And so he shared in the things that make us really human beings. Again, apart from sin, he shared in all that. He had the limitations of humanity that we have. In his time on earth, he could only be in one place at one time. He aged. He was born as a baby. He grew up into a man. His body changed. His muscles developed. His brain developed. Somebody asked me this morning, are there things Jesus learned in his human life? And I would say, yeah, I think for sure there were things that Jesus learned. I don't think Jesus came out talking. It's not like some magic story that we hear in some other religions. He didn't come out like, hey, Mom, hey, Dad, how you doing? Everything going well? He didn't come out walking already. No, he had to grow into those things. He had to learn things in his time on earth. And so he had those limitations that we have, the limitations such as pain to prevent us from doing things. Right? He had our limitations. But it wasn't just our limitations that he had our needs. He got hungry, he got thirsty, he got sleepy, he got weary, he got sick. He had emotions that we have. He experienced what it feels like as a human to have joy, to have sadness, to have anger, to have, indignation. He experienced all the emotions that we experience. He understood the trials that we go through because he went through trials that are beyond any trial that we could ever go through. But he understands it. When you're going through a trial, Jesus knows what it's like. When you're suffering, Jesus knows what it was like. He went through the trials. He went through the hardships. He understands temptation. Do you understand that? Jesus, in his humanity, understood temptation. Why? Because he was tempted. He understands it. He understands everything that it means to be us. Perfectly. What a beautiful truth that God knows what it's like to be you, just minus the sin part. God understands us because he was like unto us. And the better truth is, knowing what he knows about humanity, he loves us anyway. What a beautiful thing. And again, just like last week, talk about the Trinity. I have no idea how that works. I don't know how divine nature and human nature come together to maintain 100% of both of those things at the same time in the same person. And if you can figure that out, come talk to me. I have my doubts, though. I don't get it. But I understand that the Bible says the Word became flesh. How did God condescend? How did he get on our level? By what he took on. He took on flesh. Number two, what he left. He condescended. He got on our level by what he left. That word, the Word, became flesh, look what's next, and dwelt among us. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. That word dwelt, when we hear it, we just think he lived. That's where he lived. And it does mean that, but it means more than that. It's a lot richer than it looks just based on the word itself in English. It's literally something like pitched a tent. All right? Right? You've probably heard that before. But the Word became flesh and pitched a tent, or to borrow the Old Testament language for that, the Word became flesh and tabernacled among us. Now, the tabernacle, it was kind of like a portable temple, right? So later on, Solomon constructed the actual permanent temple. It was a semi-permanent temple, the one that stayed in place in Jerusalem. Well, the tabernacle was a portable temple that Israel put up and took down when they were wandering through the wilderness for 40 years after they were delivered out of Egypt. And if you want to go read through the Old Testament, you can read about the construction of the tabernacle, how ornate it was, all the detail and the craftsmanship that went into it, and just how detailed God's plan was for it. That's the only thing that I take from it. I don't get into the engineering side of things that much, but they would take it up and put it down everywhere they went throughout the wilderness. Whenever they would camp, they pitched a tent, and the tent was the tabernacle. And that tent, that tabernacle, was like this place where God would come and meet with his people, specifically Moses, right? So God would come, Moses would go into the tabernacle when it's put up, then God's presence would descend over the tabernacle like this cloud of glory, and in the midst of that cloud, Moses couldn't see God, but he saw God's glory manifested in that cloud, and God would speak to Moses, and he would reveal to Moses what God expected, who God is, what he was like, his goodness, his mercy. He revealed those things to Moses there in the tabernacle in the wilderness, and then when they were done, the cloud would ascend, God's presence would come out of the temple or the tabernacle. Moses would go out, the people took the tent down, packed it up, and went on to the next location, and then they did it again. But my point in all this is the tent or the tabernacle, that is the place on earth where God would come and meet with his people. And now John says right here, Jesus is the tabernacle. He's the place that God came to meet us here on earth. And that is an incredible truth, because I can't go find God. You realize that? You can go search for him if you want to try. You're not going to find him. You can go look at the depth of the ocean. You can go to the top of Mount Everest. You're not going to find him there. You can get on a rocket, a SpaceX, go to Mars, go to Jupiter, go to Pluto, leave our solar system, leave our galaxy, go to the edge of the universe. You can search. If you can make it that long, you won't find him. You can search inside yourself the way many people do. Maybe if I look in myself, I'll find God. You know what you're going to find when you look inside yourself? You're just going to find you. If you look for God in you, you find you. You can't. You cannot go and find God. You cannot get to God, but God can get to us. And that's Jesus. That's Christmas in a nutshell. It's God with us. God among us. And you know that had to be a bit of a downgrade for Jesus. It'd be kind of like, imagine, I don't think any of us have this problem, but we could all imagine, being just enormously wealthy. Imagine like you are generationally wealthy, and you're so rich. You say, you know what, you don't even say you live in a house. You live on an estate. That's where you live. And your estate has everything you want just at your fingertips. You got the indoor pool, the outdoor pool. You got basketball courts. You got tennis courts. You got inside the house, you got a movie theater. You got a bowling alley. You've got the library like the Biltmore House. That's what I want. I want a library like the Biltmore House. That'd be incredible. You got that. And in that, you got thousands of acres overlooking the mountains that you can just sit out on your back. You don't even call it a porch when you live in a house like that. Whatever you call it, it's just gorgeous. It's beyond what you could ever hope for. And you got an army of people that work for you that give you anything you want, anytime you want. That's their job. That's what they're paid for. You want something, you just ring the bell. How many of you know if you did that in your house, it wouldn't work like that, would it? If I ring a bell in my house, Brooke comes in, be like, what in the world are you doing? She's not going to say, what can I get you, baby? It just ain't going that way. But you got that. You've got all of that and more. And one day you go, you know what? I'm leaving this all. I'm going to leave this estate. I'm going to leave the beauty of this place. And I'm going to live in a tent on a street corner. what do you think people would think about you? They'd probably put you in an asylum, wouldn't they? You don't do that. They'd think you're crazy. They'd think you're crazy. And yet, that's not even close to what Jesus left to come here. It's not even the same neighborhood. It's not the same scale. See, Jesus left the perfection of heaven. Jesus left the indescribable beauty of heaven. Jesus left the comfort of heaven. He left the perfection of heaven. He left the protection of heaven. He left all of that to come and pitch a tent among us. A people who, verse 11 says, did not receive him. So what that means is Jesus left the glory of heaven for the rejection of earth. Why in the world would he do that? Is he crazy? That's what we say about any person that did that. I left my estate to go live in a tent on a street corner. Is he crazy? Is Jesus crazy for what he left behind to come here to us who rejected him? Is he crazy? No, he loves us. He did it because he loves us. He condescended. Last way, he stoops down and we'll be finished. What he hid. It's what he hid. So it says he became flesh, he dwelt among us, and then it says, and we beheld his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Now, I don't have much time left, but I want you to see this. That word dwelt there, same one that we looked at in the last verse, or the last point. It's not just about the tabernacle itself, but it's about the glory of God that filled the tabernacle. It's the same root that we get that word Shekinah from. Have you ever heard the word Shekinah? The Shekinah glory of God. The Shekinah was the visible manifestation of the glory of God. When I talk about God descending down like a cloud out of heaven, it's the Shekinah that Moses experienced. He couldn't, again, see God face to face because you couldn't see God the Father face to face and live, remember? But he saw the glory of God, the Shekinah of God. That's what descended down into that tabernacle, and it was so radiant. The glory of that Shekinah was so radiant, it was so bright that when Moses would leave the tabernacle after he met with God, whenever he left after an encounter with the glory of God, his face shone too, and he was so bright that the people couldn't look on him. And so you remember the story, he had to veil his face. Moses had to cover up his face because it was too bright and too radiant for people to look on. And now John says right here, he says that Jesus now shows and displays this Shekinah glory of God, same root. And in heaven, before Jesus came to earth, in heaven, the second person of the Trinity, the Son of God, Jesus Christ, in heaven, that glory was all out on display for all to see. If you saw Jesus in heaven before he came down to earth, you would have seen the express, manifest glory of Jesus all about him. It would have been impossible for anybody to miss. But how many of you understand when he came to earth, he didn't walk around radiating? You realize that? Jesus wasn't walking around glowing in Jerusalem, in Judea, and Samaria. When Jesus was born, the season we're celebrating right now, how many of you know he didn't come out with a halo? It wasn't like that. Jesus didn't walk around glowing. He didn't walk around radiating. When he came, how'd he come? He came ordinary. He came as a tiny little helpless baby. When Jesus came, he came in a backwoods little village that was probably smaller than Gallonsville. He came and he slept in an inn, in a stable. He slept in a manger. He slept in the hay. He came into this world, and if you did not know who it was you were looking at, you would never for 1 second think, looking at this, that this is God. You would never think that. You would go, God isn't a baby. God can't be a baby. Glory does not live in that. There's no glory in a baby. They're cute, they're cuddly, they make you feel all warm when you hold them, but that's not glory. God's glorious Shekinah glory in that little bitty helpless baby? But you'd be wrong. And you would miss it if you thought that. See, the glory was there. He just hid it for a while. The glory was there all along in him, but he veiled it in his flesh for a while. And most people, and this is still true by the way, most people didn't ever see the glory wrapped up in the man. They just saw the man. And I could not have done it that way. I'm glad I'm not Jesus, because if I would have been like that, if I had all the power of God in me, man, I'd be floating around, zapping lasers out of my eyeballs. I'd be doing all kind of crazy stuff. I wouldn't have hit it. Nobody would mistake it for me, I promise you. If I had that power, I'd be putting it on display for everybody to see. But he didn't do it that way. He hid it. But every so often, he let that glory out. Every so often, he peeled back that veil. He did it when he healed the sick. He did it when he cleansed the lepers. He did it when he gave sight to the blind. He did it when he healed the lame. He did it when he raised people from the dead. He did it when he was raised from the dead. He did it when he taught. He did it when he spoke. He did it when he forgave sins. All of those things are Jesus peeling that veil back to let you see the glory that is in him. But most people, even though he did those things, and many people saw the things that he did, they still missed. They missed it because he wasn't what they were looking for. They wanted the power. They wanted the flashiness of the power, like what I would have given them. Again, I'd be up on some mountain looking down on people, having them bowing down around me. It would have been flash. But Jesus wasn't letting his glory out to show off the flashiness of his power. He was doing it for another reason. He was showing off his grace and his truth. That's what John says here. We beheld his glory. Glory is that the only begotten of the Father, full. What's full? The glory. What's it full of? Grace and truth. When God passed by Moses, after Moses pled with him to show me your glory, God revealed himself to be the God who is merciful and faithful. And I think that's what John is thinking about here. That's the point. The point of him unveiling his glory was to testify to the grace and the truth that filled it. They wanted the power, and so they missed the glory. And we can miss that glory too. And do. We can miss it today. We can miss the glory of Jesus if we look to him for the wrong things, if our eyes are closed, if we're just interested in the cool things that he can do for us. And then we're going to become like the ones who reject him, the ones who, when he came, did not receive him. What's the response this week? Last week it was just worship. What's the response this week? Well, what do you do when someone comes to see you? What do you do when someone comes to visit you? You open the door, you welcome them in, you receive them. And that's the choice we have today as we look at this Jesus, the Jesus who's among us, that he came into this world, and he's not going to butt into your life though. Would you welcome him? Would you receive him? Or would you reject him? Rejecting is just slamming the door. It's pushing him away. Why did he come? He came so that you might receive him. And we'll look at this in a couple of weeks, because to all that received him, to them gave he the power to become sons of God. So I'll ask you today, are you receiving Jesus? I don't just mean, did you pray a prayer one time and ask him to come into your heart or something like that? That's fine. I'm talking about right now. Because when Jesus comes, to receive him does not mean that you give him access to a little piece of your heart. Now, when he comes, receiving him means you give it all to him. You get every room, every corridor, every inch, from head to toe. That's receiving Jesus. He's not content to have a guest room in your house. He wants the whole thing. Are you receiving him today? Father, I thank you for this truth. What an incredible truth. I wish I could communicate it in a way that truly gave a sense of how incredible it is that God would become man. That God would leave the glory of heaven for the rejection of this earth. That God would cover up the glory, hide it. Father, I pray this morning for each person that's here, everyone that's listening, everyone that the Spirit has been at work in their heart to say today, you need to receive Jesus. Maybe it's for your initial salvation. Maybe it's for your day-to-day walk. Whatever it is, God, would you give us the strength today to respond? Could we still be in awe today of a God who's not just transcendent, but a God who stoops to our level? Thank you for